Hey guys, so today I'm going to be doing kind of an unscripted talk about my thoughts on basically getting fast at 2 by 2 not, without learning too many algs. And there are really two ways to this. So when you're looking at 2 by 2, those who don't do 2 by 2 a lot think that it's a very alg based event, which it is. However, people don't consider that it is actually not that hard to get better at it when you're um, it's not that hard to get better at it when you're not trying to learn too many algs, especially if you're not intending to become insanely fast on 2 by 2. So for example, I know a lot of people who struggle with 2 by 2. However, like they main some other event, they're better at another event, but they tend to not look at 2 by 2, even though they want to better their sum of ranks by just generally improving in every event. But a lot of people tend to put off 2 by 2 because they see it as a very alg based event, and they don't tend to realize that you can actually get reasonably fast at 2 by 2 without learning too many algs. And again, I can prove this through a previous video of mine, which is basically about not about actually it's an average of 12 that I did with LBL and Ortega. And those are basically the two methods that I'm going to be talking about in this video. um, so basically, let's get started with what these two methods are. So LBL and Ortega are both non-alg based methods. They each contain very few algorithms. I believe layer by layer contains so the seven basically the seven 2 look OLLs are, I guess, necessary for both of these, plus two PLLs in layer by layer and two PBLs. You could say two PBLs, actually a bit more, but generally more angles of PBLs, which is permuting both layers in Ortega. And I'm going to be talking about basically what these two methods are, how they work, and more importantly, which you should choose if you want to get faster 2 by 2 without learning too many algs. So the first thing to look into is very simply that both these methods will not achieve insanely fast results. Again, you could be looking for, like I did, about sub 3-ish, which you can definitely achieve with LBL and Ortega. Not a lot of people do know this, but officially I have a 2.41 average with layer by layer alone. And the reason for it was technically it is CLL because I got a lot of PLL skips, but that is the beauty with layer by layer. So I'm going to be explaining both the methods now. So layer by layer is a method where, if you can see properly, I'm not sure, but layer by layer is when you make a layer which is a side where all the pieces in the side are permuted correctly. So basically you have this kind of bar like thing going around here, and then you use one of the 7 OLLs, as I explained, to solve the opposite face, and you're left with a PLL to solve the entire cube. Then there's the Ortega method, which I also mentioned. It's non-popularly known as Varasano, but not many people know that. This is actually pretty good for layer by layer. Okay, by the way, LBL is layer by layer, beginners, yeah. So Ortega is a bit different. Instead of building a layer, you just have to build a side. So as you can see here, there's a clear difference. The side is built, but apart from that, there's no bar like structure going around here, so the pieces are not permuted correctly in the side. Then what you can do is solve like again the opposite face, and then you'd have a PBL permuting both layers at the same time, one algorithm that does that. And basically the real advantage with this is that if there's not that good of a layer, you don't have to struggle with making a layer. You can make a side and continue from there without too much trouble with making a layer if it's a bad solution. So I'm gonna get it right out of the way right now. I do think that combining both these methods is the best solution, and the reason for this is quite obvious, but first I'll go over the benefits of both of these methods. So with layer by layer, the one thing a lot of people talk about, and again, if so Laser Monkey, I'm not sure if that's how you say it, but he has a video on how he gets fast with LBL and why he doesn't prefer Ortega. I do generally agree with the LBL part, but not so much with the Ortega. I think Ortega is an extremely capable method on its own as well. So basically, the key benefit with LBL is simply that you can maintain fluidity. So I can just show you a solve here. Hopefully it's not too bad. No, why am I doing CLL? Okay, 1 second, I'm sorry. Okay, so that was not meant to be CLL, but that was a PLL skip. I can show you one more. But the idea is, I'll get to why that's important. The PLL skip part, anyways. So you can see through a solve like that it's a fairly fluid method that you can learn. If you can, you don't even have to learn good look ahead to get good at this. As long as you can react quickly to a case, as in as soon as you're done with the layer, you can immediately recognize the OLL case and proceed into that, followed by the PLL. Then you should get fairly good with this method. And basically the idea with this is extremely simple. It's all revolving around the fact that 2x2 is an extremely limited puzzle in a sort of sense. I don't know how to describe it, but basically, unlike with other bigger puzzles, or even with, for example, CLL or the EG methods, another method that involves more advanced recognition, you don't have to look for much when you're recognizing cases. Over here, when I make my layer, I am only looking for the top face. I'm by top face I mean basically the orientation of the blue pieces, which is opposite to the green face that I just made. You don't have to look for anything else. You don't have to look for how these colors are and like how they are. So these are opposites, these are opposites. You don't have to look for that. That doesn't matter here. That matters for other methods such as CLL, but it does not matter here. 1 second. That was, sorry about that, you could say. But anyways, coming back to what I was talking about, you don't have to recognize much in LBL to get fast recognition, which is why it's very easy to have good look ahead in this method. The idea is basically that there's nothing much to look for, okay? And that's why you can react very quickly. And the second thing about this method is obviously that there is the grace of the PLL skip, which happens actually rather often if you think about it. And a lot of times, as you progress in the method of doing LBL, which I don't recommend. Firstly, if you want to get good at 2x2, like you want to make it your main event or it is your main event, don't do this. Learn algorithms and get faster. Don't do this. This is not really a shortcut, but this is a way to just do well in competition and not really excel in 2x2 all that much. But if you do plan on just wanting to get decent at 2x2, the idea is that you can get a PLL skip rather often, and in some sense you can convert LBL into a makeshift kind of CLL. So when I was using it, for example, if I saw a case like this, eventually over time I realized that, okay, wait, actually I'll show the case. So it's this CLL, right? But if I kept getting this case often enough, I learned that doing that did not actually help, and that in fact I could do the other case to solve it. Basically what I mean is that over time I learned to just do that to get the PLL skip. And similar for other cases. For example, this case. For this case, I actually ended up, after getting several times, and for many other cases as well, I learned that you could just directly go into the PLL. Basically, I learned not how to predict my PLL. I wasn't predicting my PLL on the spot. Rather, I was just remembering the PLL from getting the case over and over again. So from this case, for example, when I do the PLL, I'm going to get my bar on the back. If I do it like this, my bar will be on the back. So I was able to transition into it like that. And it was actually rather fast. It wasn't the fastest thing, but it worked, and I was able to get pretty good averages with it until I switched to other methods, which I keep failing in competition. Okay. So now let's talk about Ortega. Ortega is a little different in the sense that although it seems fairly similar, there is a lot there's a lot different in it. And one thing to just go over is that a lot of people tend to say that LBL is part of Ortega, and you could say this in a certain sense, because when they say make a side, a layer is a kind of side, if that makes any sense. But we'll go over that a little later. Basically, the entire point with this is that it's more of not thinking of its advantages on its own, rather thinking of its advantages against LBL. So when you think of its advantages against LBL, it becomes a lot more obvious. Basically, the pros with this method are that you don't have to struggle with looking for a layer. If you get some bad scramble like this for LBL, this is bad for LBL, you can just do that and have a side ready. You don't have to struggle with making any kind of layer. You don't have to have a really bad layer solution which will drastically worsen your time. Instead, you can just make the side and then go on with your solution. And in general, I do think that you will consistently get slightly worse times with Ortega. And the reason for this is not with the side or with the OLL, it's more so with the permuting of both layers. When you're doing it, this is an exact example. You can get something like this. This is when you get a PLL skip on the top, which would be normally very good for LBL. But now it's not that good. It's actually the worst case possible to get a PLL skip, because you still have these two pieces down here. So you have to rotate and do it, or you have to do something like this, solve it, and then do another R2. But all that stuff basically just adds to your time. It's not good at all. And that is the main, in my opinion, just the main issue with Ortega, is having flipped cases like that. However, the general PBLs, for example, this case, they're rather quick. They involve a little more regrips than your classic PLLs, which can be executed pretty quickly. And basically, a lot of them, one way or another, end up being a little bit shorter than the PLL. So in PLLs, you have the Y perm and the J perm or T perm, whichever way you do it. If you're doing any other alg for this, don't, please. But going on with that, with these you have short cases like that, and very quickly executable cases like, for example, this. And just things like that are what really shine in Ortega, is that it's a much easier method in a sense, because you don't have to make the layer. But it can also be really good in the permuting of both layers. It can be really easy in the last step, or it could be a worst nightmare in the last step, is basically what I'm going at. So now I'm going to talk about basically why I think both of them are good. And the reason I think this is very simple. Basically, you want to have most flexibility. You don't want to see an LBL scramble, see a scramble and say, oh, this could be good for Ortega, but I use LBL, and vice versa. Basically, you don't want to be limited by one method, and you want to do both, because both methods are fairly easy to learn, and practicing them is not much of learning new algorithms or techniques of any sort. It's basically just doing a bunch of solves until you get familiar with them. You're able to recognize cases and also sometimes predict PLLs or PBLs, whichever way you do it. So basically the point I'm trying to aim at is that I think that LBL is generally slightly superior, and Ortega can be used. LBL should primarily be used, especially if you have easy layer solutions where it's like an insert like this, or even if you have something just like this, where you just have to insert this and go into that. Things like that is where LBL really shines, because you can get crazy fast solves with LBL alone. And there's also the PLL skip, right? You basically can't get skips in Ortega. The closest thing you can get to a skip is like a very easy case, which is this case, the R2 F2 R2 for PBL. But other than that, you don't really get skips in Ortega, and the PLL skips you get in Ortega are bad because you have to flip the cube around. So that's where um, mm, layer by layer really shines, is that you can actually get skips, and if you are lucky enough to be the beneficiary of a bunch of skips, or what am I saying, just get a lot of skips. If you get a lot of skips, then you can get some crazy fast times. As I've said, I have a 2.4 on average when I knew only LBL. I got 4 PLL skips in an average. Uh, oh god, uh, I'm very upset about that, but yeah. So I got 4 PLL skips and I got a 2.4 average, which at the time of when I got it ranked me 4th in India, which is really crazy. But basically, what I'm trying to angle at is that LBL does can get you really good times if you practice it a lot. However, it's not always the best method. So in some cases, making a layer would be really inefficient, or it's just not a good idea, right? And in that case, it is really the better option to go with Ortega. Like, don't stress yourself over making an inefficient layer and then just having to like possibly mess it up making another one. That's all not needed. Just use Ortega and you can still get pretty good times with it. Even with the flip, see, that was a pretty reasonable time. It was probably like a 2 or 3. So what I'm saying is that you can get really fast with combining both these methods because it gives you a reasonable amount of versatility, as well as it's basically almost completely algless except with learning basic algorithms, and that can really get you pretty far. So now I'm just gonna share some basic tips I have with both methods. LBL, when you're practicing, start turning slowly and don't worry too much about times for both of them, especially at the beginning, but just start turning slowly, because even if you turn slowly in LBL, for example, just give an example, you can get reasonable solves and just improve your TPS over time, and that's really the way to go for LBL. Also, don't use the T-perm for this case, use the J-perm, and learn all these algs from different ways. For example, if you have something like this, do this, don't do like a you just basically learn algs from different ways. And for this is actually learning the right algs, not more algs, but the right algs for Ortega. It actually is a lot more needed in Ortega because there are so many people I see that do this, which this case you solve it with D moves and things like that. It's not really that good, but there's oh come on, corner twist. Yeah, there's this case which is crazy fast, right? And there are just so many different algs with Ortega, and really you should honestly pick what is there for you. But there are pick which algs are good for you. But honestly, there are some Ortega algs that are just clearly worse than others. So it's very important to choose the correct Ortega algs. So it's really about choosing good algs and practicing a lot, and that's basically it. So getting fast at 2x2 with Ortega or LBL. But one major thing is that if you plan on doing 2x2 as your main event, don't do this. Originally you can, like when you're starting out, it's fine to get fast with a method like this, because apart from just getting fast at 2x2 in general, it can give you a lot of awareness of the cube, in a sense that you learn more as you just pick up the method. You learn what case brings what last layer and how to build efficient layers. Things like that are helpful in this, but at the same time, I think that you should eventually go beyond this and learn new algos if you plan on pursuing 2x2. It's not good to just stay with a method like this because it's just not sustainable and it's not that fast either. You can get way faster with other methods. So yeah, that's basically my talk about this. This is completely unscripted. I don't know why I did this. No, I'm joking. Okay, so yeah, that's basically it for the video. Thanks for watching and hopefully you got something out of this. Bye.